Hi guys, Ray from Whimsical Pictures here, and today I'm bringing you my wrap-up for Diverseathon 2017, which ended today. And for this, if you haven't seen my TBR, I was planning to sort of deepen my experience with Japanese literature in this Diverseathon. Partly because I have my JET interview coming up this Wednesday, and that kind of gave me a good excuse to just go ahead and read some of the Japanese books that have been on my shelves that I haven't read yet. And so I had picked out 4 books that I wanted to read, and I got through 2 of them, plus like 200 pages and change, which is decent, you know, especially considering that all of the political stuff happening this week kept me pretty busy. I think I did okay. So basically the first book that I finished was this little guy, The Stones Cry Out by Hikaru Okuizumi, and I actually ended up really enjoying this. This is the story of Tsuyoshi Manase, who was a soldier during World War II, and after the war opens up a bookstore and recalls his strongest memory from the war, which was he heard a dying Japanese soldier within a cave babbling at him about how every stone in the world, every little pebble, contains the history of the entire universe within it. And so he begins as a hobby collecting stones and categorizing them. And this book is just so perfectly put together. Like, I'm so amazed at how much meaning and how much beauty and how much sadness Okuizumi was able to fit into such a small novel. This is only about 120 pages long. But not a single word, not a single sentence is wasted. Everything is moving towards sort of the perfect crescendo for this book about the ways that the memories of violence move within our lives and never really leave us. They just get passed down from generation to generation. And what I was actually thinking of when I read this was Ayako by Osamu Tezuka, which I had my issues with, and I feel like reading this, I got the story that I wanted to get from Ayako. So I think if you're a fan of that book, read this book. But also, if not, read this book. If you want like an example of the prose, which as I said is beautiful, it's so packed with meaning and eloquence and elegance. This is a quote from page 28. It's not a spoiler. He did not want to remember. Manase understood that very well. Even though he could taste his fear, he needed only to remind himself that he was lying on a soft mattress, not a cold bed of rocks, and the fear would retreat. Time fits together in a peculiar way. Fortune and misfortune, pleasure and pain, all are exiled to the past to form a landscape in monochrome. It is a mystery and a blessing. So this follows Manase, but then it switches occasionally to his wife and to his 2 sons. And through that, it really paints a picture of this man's life and the ways that his experiences of the war never, ever left him. Even as he's living, you know, a calm, frankly boring life, that never leaves him. And as a result, it never leaves his family, and it never leaves his community. And yeah, this is just such a wonderfully crafted little book, and I definitely recommend seeking it out if you can find it. You can get through it, as I said, in a couple hours. It's very short, but it packs a punch. I gave it 4 stars, I believe, on Goodreads. And the other complete book that I made it through is my other short one, which was Banana Yoshimoto's Hardboiled and Hard Luck. This is a bind-up of 2 of her novellas. Although the second one is really more of a long, short story, I think. It's only about 60 pages long. The first one's about 100. And the first story here, Hardboiled, is sort of about this young woman who is sort of trying to get over the death of her lover. And basically it's talking about those emotions she's going through a single night where she's staying in sort of a weird hotel in the middle of nowhere, and happens upon a ghost. And the second one is about another such young woman, which, is really Banana Yoshimoto's forte, who is struggling with the grief of having a little sister who is in a coma and who is about to be taken off life support. And sort of about how the most tragic events in our lives can lead to some weird doors opening as she gets to know the older brother of her sister's fiancé. And these are both, again, such elegantly crafted stories. The first one was by far my favorite. The second one I thought could get a little heavy-handed, but not too bad. I still really enjoyed it. I love the way that Yoshimoto can handle such a tragic subject matter with such a tender, deft hand, and just the humanity with which she writes is second to none. I can't wait to read more of her stuff, honestly. But the first one I loved even more. For me, it just covered sort of that weird, surreal feeling of being in like a transitory state, of being somewhere in between point A and point B and not really knowing where point B is. And that feeling of like being in a motel far from home and just nothing quite feels real, I don't know if you guys have had days like that, but it's something that it's a feeling that I've always been interested in and that has a lot of bearing in my life because as a military brat, I've always spent so much time in airports, and that's the feeling I always get when I'm there. So it just captured a feeling that means a lot to me. And my favorite painter is Edward Hopper, and he sort of is also a master at capturing those sort of moments between moments, those emotions between emotions. And that's what I got from this story. And to give an example of some of the prose, from page 19 in the first story, she says, "I headed for the baths. To tell the truth, I was ready to get away from all this, to go to another town, to slip ahead into some time other than today. But it was too late for that now. I was already up to my neck in this night, submerged in this strange and lonely atmosphere. Already I had the feeling that I was seeing everything through some sort of filter, and so I couldn't think seriously about anything. This night had me in its power." And then I just have to share this quote from page 41 because I am in love with it. Because she says, "The rituals of our daily lives permeate our very bodies. After all we had been through, the one tie that still bound my mother and me was the way time moved in our lives, because it had seeped down so deep inside us." I love that quote. I want to write it on something. But yeah, it's just, again, the humanity with which she writes her characters and the subtlety of emotion while also not being afraid to get a little sentimental is something I really respect about her. This was another book I gave 4 stars, and I also recommend this. And it's such a cute little book. I love the design. And then the third book that I made decent progress in is this 600-page thing that I got about 150 pages into. So this is my first ever Haruki Murakami, The Windup Bird Chronicle, and it is absolutely engrossing. I haven't even gotten to the part where he goes into the well and discovers the netherworld under his neighborhood, which is in the premise. It's like 150 pages in and it hasn't happened yet. But somehow I don't even care, because every page is just super interesting and weird, and I am really enjoying this. So I will definitely be doing some sort of review of this book when I finish it, because, you know, it might be an interesting insight to get, instead of like those books that are those videos that are from people who are fans of Murakami, you know, getting a perspective on this book from a Murakami virgin like myself. But yeah, great stuff. I mean, do you really need me to tell you that? It's Murakami, so. And yeah. So the final book, I only made it about 30 or 40 pages into this guy, and again, I've read another book from her, which was Real World. This is Natsuo Kirino's Out, and I am going to be taking this with me out of town this week, and hopefully getting further into it. I really want to finish the Windup Bird Chronicle first, but this will be right after it, because, again, it was engrossing. It's just, something this dark and twisted and full of awful people is not necessarily what I needed right now. I really just couldn't get through it this week, because it's... well, you know, I'm sure you've been watching the news. Even if you're in another country, you probably know that we Americans need some real help right now. Yeah, so yesterday I was like into my Windup Bird Chronicle, loving it, but it was just too serious for me. So, and I kept getting distracted, so I ended up actually going back to, sort of a go-to middle grade series I've been reading since I was 10, which is the Percy Jackson series, and started rereading my favorite book from that, because I just needed the escapism. So, yeah. I just needed something light and familiar and happy. So, but overall, in terms of these guys, this was a very successful Diverseathon because I loved everything that I read. I was really happy and surprised with this one. I picked it up on a whim. I didn't know anything about it, and I ended up loving it so much. So that was definitely, you know, a very pleasant surprise for me. And, yeah. That was my Diverseathon, basically. Even though it got a little sidetracked there at the end, I think I did pretty okay, considering I'm not the fastest reader in the world. And, yeah. I don't know. Reading all this Japanese literature makes me even more excited for my interview on Wednesday, so wish me luck on that. Let me know in the comments if you're interested in any of these books. Let me know if you know any great Japanese literature that you think I should read. I would love some recommendations. I really want to expand my knowledge of Japanese literature and Japanese authors, so go ahead and let me know. And otherwise, that's all for now, guys. Happy reading. Bye.